The market was alive with noise, vendors shouting, children laughing, and the smell of roasted meat filling the air. But in the middle of it all, there was a small shop that stood out. It was a shoe shop, and the woman who ran it was known to everyone as Mama's Shoes. Her real name was Clara, but no one called her that. She was famous for selling the best shoes at prices, so low it seemed impossible. People flocked to her shop, leaving with smiles on their faces and new shoes on their feet. But Clara had a secret, a dark one. Her shoes weren't just shoes. They did something to the people who wore them, something no one could see or understand. And Clara? She smiled sweetly, her eyes hiding the truth as she handed over the neatly wrapped packages. One day, a man named John brought his pregnant wife, Lisa, to Clara's shop. Lisa was furious with John. She had seen a text message on his phone from her best friend, Sarah, and her mind was spinning with suspicion. John tried to explain, but Lisa wasn't having it. "I don't care what you say, John. You've been lying to me," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the market noise. Clara watched them quietly, her smile never wavering. She picked up a pair of shoes and held them out to Lisa. "These would look perfect on you," she said softly. But Lisa wasn't interested. She turned away, her arms crossed. Clara's smile tightened. She picked up her phone and pretended to make a call. "Yes, the shoes are still available," she said loudly. "But if you want them, you'll have to come quickly. Another customer just changed her mind." Lisa's ears perked up. She glanced back at the shoes. If someone else wanted them, maybe they were special. She hesitated, then grabbed them. "Fine, we'll take them," she said, her voice still sharp. John sighed and paid for the shoes, adding a second pair for himself. Clara smiled as she handed them the bag. "You made the right choice," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. But her eyes? They were cold. The drive home was silent. Lisa stared out the window, her anger simmering. John gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight. When they got home, Lisa stormed upstairs, dropping the bag of shoes in the wardrobe. She didn't want to talk to John. Not now. Maybe not ever. Later that night, as Lisa cooked dinner, she heard a scream. It was loud and piercing, coming from upstairs. Her heart raced as she rushed to the bedroom, her pregnant belly slowing her down. But when she got there, John was asleep, his chest rising and falling peacefully. Lisa frowned. Had she imagined it? She shook her head and went back to the kitchen. When dinner was ready, she called John down, but he didn't come. "I'm not hungry," he said, his voice cold. Lisa froze. John had never refused her food before, not even after their worst fights. Something was wrong, very wrong. The next morning, Lisa woke up feeling uneasy. She had a doctor's appointment scheduled, and though she tried to push the strange events of the previous night out of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She put on the new shoes she had bought from Clara's shop and headed to the hospital, her heart heavy with worry. The hospital was bustling with activity, but Lisa barely noticed. She went through the routine tests, her mind elsewhere. When the doctor called her into his office, his expression was grim. "Lisa," he began, his voice gentle but serious, "your blood levels are dangerously low. If this continues, it could harm both you and the baby." Lisa's heart sank. She stared at the doctor, her mind racing. "But I feel fine," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't understand." The doctor sighed, leaning forward in his chair. "Sometimes these things can happen without any obvious symptoms, but the results don't lie. We need to act quickly. I'm recommending an emergency surgery to stabilize your condition." Lisa's hands shook as she clutched the edge of the chair. "Surgery? But I need to talk to John first. I need him to be here." The doctor nodded. "Of course. Call him, and we'll proceed as soon as possible." Lisa pulled out her phone and dialed John's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, but he didn't pick up. She tried again, her anxiety growing with each unanswered call. "Where are you, John?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The doctor watched her with concern. "Lisa, we can't wait much longer. If we don't act now, the consequences could be severe." Lisa nodded. tears welling up in her eyes. I need to go home. I need to find him. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. All right, but please, come back as soon as you can. Your health and your baby's health depend on it. Lisa left the hospital in a daze, her mind spinning. She drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. When she arrived, she rushed inside, calling John's name, but the house was silent. She checked the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. Nothing. Then she heard a sound coming from the guest room. Her heart pounded as she approached the door, her hand trembling as she turned the knob. What she saw made her blood run cold. John was there, his arms wrapped around Sarah, her best friend. They were laughing, completely oblivious to her presence. Lisa stood frozen in the doorway, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. "John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. John turned, his eyes widening in shock. "Lisa, I can explain." But Lisa didn't wait for an explanation. She felt a sharp pain in her stomach and doubled over, clutching her belly. A warm liquid trickled down her legs, and she realized with horror that her water had broken. "John," she cried, her voice filled with panic. "Something's wrong." John sprang into action, rushing to her side. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, his voice filled with urgency. But as they drove to the hospital, Lisa's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The betrayal, the pain, the fear for her baby. It was all too much. By the time they arrived, she was barely conscious, her vision blurring as the nurses rushed her into the operating room. When Lisa woke up, the first thing she noticed was a sterile smell of antiseptic. The room was quiet, save for the faint beeping of a machine nearby. Her body felt heavy, her mind foggy, as if she were swimming through a thick haze. She blinked, trying to clear her vision, and slowly turned her head to take in her surroundings. She was in a hospital bed, the white walls and fluorescent lights glaring down at her. And then it hit her. The pain, the memory, the baby. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, but the bump was gone. Her heart sank as the reality of what had happened crashed over her like a tidal wave. The baby was gone. Her baby, the life she had carried, the future she had dreamed of, it was all gone. Tears welled up in her eyes, but before she could fully process her grief, she heard a voice, a familiar voice, cold, distant. "Lisa." She turned her head and saw John sitting by her bed. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, as if he hadn't slept in days. But what made her heart stop was the sight of Sarah, her best friend, sitting right beside him. Sarah's hand was resting on John's, their fingers intertwined. The sight was like a knife to Lisa's chest. "John," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "What were you doing?" John didn't meet her eyes. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, as if he were steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Lisa," he began, his voice flat and emotionless. I love Sarah now. I want to be with her." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lisa felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. She stared at John, her mind refusing to believe what she was hearing. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. But the cold, hard-look in John's eyes told her otherwise. "What are you talking about?" Lisa choked out, her voice breaking. "John, we just lost our baby. How can you say that? How can you do this to me?" John finally looked at her, but there was no warmth in his eyes, no remorse, just a cold, detached emptiness that made Lisa's blood run cold. "I'm sorry, Lisa," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but this is how I feel. Sarah and I were in love. I can't pretend anymore." Lisa's heart shattered into a million pieces. She turned to Sarah, her best friend, the woman she had trusted more than anyone. "Sarah, how could you?" she whispered, her voice filled with pain and betrayal. Sarah had the decency to look ashamed, but she didn't let go of John's hand. "I'm sorry, Lisa," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I never meant for this to happen. But I love him, and he loves me." Lisa felt as if the walls were closing in around her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The betrayal was too much to bear. Her husband, her best friend, The two people she had trusted most in the world had turned their backs on her when she needed them the most. "Get out," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Both of you. Get out." John hesitated, his eyes flickering with something: guilt, regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He stood up, still holding Sarah's hand. "I'll give you some time," he said, his voice cold and distant. "But this is how it is, Lisa. I'm not coming back." Lisa turned her head away, unable to look at them any longer. She heard the door open and close, and then she was alone. The silence was deafening. The weight of her loss, her grief for betrayal, pressed down on her like a crushing weight. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. The baby was gone. Her marriage was over. Her best friend had betrayed her. And the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, had become a stranger. Lisa's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How had this happened? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? She thought back to the shoes, to Clara's shop, to the strange, unsettling feeling she had gotten when she first put them on. Was it possible? Could the shoes have done this? Could they have twisted John's mind, turned him into this cold, heartless stranger? But even as the thought crossed her mind, Lisa couldn't bring herself to believe it. It was too fantastical, too impossible. And yet, deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Something beyond her understanding. She closed her eyes, the tears still falling. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to move forward. All she knew was that her world had been shattered, and she was left to pick up the pieces alone. But even in her darkest moment, a small spark of determination flickered within her. She couldn't let this destroy her. She couldn't let John and Sarah win. She had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim her life, her sanity, her future. For now, though, all she could do was cry. Cry for the baby she had lost. Cry for the love she had lost. Cry for the life she had lost. And as she lay there, her body racked with sobs, she vowed to herself that she would find a way to survive this, no matter what it took. The hours passed in a blur. Nurses came and went, checking on her, but Lisa barely noticed. She was lost in her grief, her mind replaying the events of the past few days over and over again. The fights, the betrayal, the loss. It was too much to bear. But as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the hospital window, Lisa felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The tears had dried, leaving her eyes raw and swollen, but her mind was clearer now. She knew what she had to do. She reached for the phone on the bedside table and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Her stepmother, Margaret, the woman she had always kept at arm's length, believing her to be cold and uncaring. But in this moment, Lisa had no one else to turn to. The phone rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Margaret," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "It's me. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Margaret's voice, firm and steady, replied, "I'm on my way." Lisa hung up the phone and leaned back against the pillows, a small flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Margaret arrived at the hospital within an hour of Lisa's call. When she walked into the room, her face was a mixture of concern and determination. She had always been a woman of few words, but her presence was enough to make Lisa feel a small sense of relief. Margaret's sharp eyes took in the sight of Lisa lying in the hospital bed, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. Without a word, Margaret walked over to bed and placed a firm hand on Lisa's shoulder. "I'm here now," Margaret said simply, her voice steady and reassuring. "Let's get you home." Lisa nodded, too exhausted to speak. She allowed Margaret to help her out of bed and into a wheelchair, her body feeling heavy and weak. The nurses handed Margaret a stack of discharge papers, which she signed quickly and efficiently. Within minutes, they were out of the hospital and into Margaret's car. The drive to Margaret's house was quiet. Lisa stared out the window, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She felt numb, as if the weight of everything that had happened had drained her of all feeling. But beneath the numbness, there was a gnawing unease, a sense that something was deeply wrong. Something beyond the betrayal, beyond the loss. something darker. When they arrived at Margaret's house, Lisa was struck by how different it felt from her own home. Margaret's house was small but cozy, filled with the scent of herbs and the warmth of a crackling fire. It was a stark contrast to the cold, empty house she had shared with John. Margaret helped Lisa inside and settled her on the couch, wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders. "You need to rest," Margaret said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll make you something to eat." Lisa nodded, too tired to protest. She leaned back against the cushions, her eyes closing as she listened to the sounds of Margaret moving around the kitchen. The clinking of pots and pans, the sizzle of food on the stove, the comforting aroma of soup, it all felt so foreign, yet so comforting. For the first time in days, Lisa felt a small sense of safety. When Margaret returned with a bowl of steaming soup, Lisa hesitated. She hadn't had much of an appetite since the loss, but the smell of the soup stirred something in her. She took the bowl with trembling hands and began to eat, the warmth spreading through her body with each spoonful. Margaret sat down across from her, watching her with a careful eye. "You've been through a lot," she said finally. "But you're strong, Lisa. Stronger than you think. You'll get through this." Lisa looked up at her, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "I feel broken, like everything I had is gone." Margaret's expression softened, and for the first time, Lisa saw a glimpse of the woman behind the stoic exterior. "I know it feels that way," Margaret said gently, "but you're not alone. I'm here, and we'll figure this out together." Lisa nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She finished the soup in silence, her mind still racing with unanswered questions. Why had John changed so suddenly? Why had Sarah betrayed her? And why did she feel like there was something more to all of this, something she couldn't quite put her finger on? Over the next few days, Margaret took care of Lisa with a quiet efficiency that surprised her. She cooked meals, made sure Lisa took her medication, and even sat with her late into the night when the nightmares came. Lisa had always thought of Margaret as cold and distant, but now she saw a different side of her, a side that was fiercely protective, deeply caring, and unwaveringly loyal. But despite Margaret's care, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the grief or the betrayal. It was something deeper, something darker. She found herself replaying the events of the past few weeks in her mind, searching for answers. The fights with John, the strange, unsettling feeling she had gotten when she first put on the shoes from Clara's shop, the way everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Lisa finally voiced her thoughts. "Margaret," she began hesitantly, "do you believe in evil?" Margaret looked up from the book she was reading, her expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" Lisa hesitated, unsure how to put her feelings into words. "I mean, do you think there are things out there that can influence people, make them do things they wouldn't normally do?" Margaret set her book down and leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Lisa. "What are you getting at, Lisa?" Lisa took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. I think the shoes I bought from Clara's shop did something to John, to me, to everything. I don't know how to explain it, but something feels wrong, like there's something evil at work here." Margaret's expression grew serious. She didn't dismiss Lisa's words or laugh them off. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this. "I've heard stories," she said quietly, "about people who sell things that aren't what they seem, things that carry curses. If what you're saying is true, then we need to be careful." Lisa's heart pounded as she listened to Margaret's words. "You believe me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded. "I do. And if there's even a chance that something evil is at play here, we need to find out what it is. But first, you need to focus on healing. Physically and emotionally. The rest can wait." Lisa nodded, though the unease in her chest didn't go away. She knew Margaret was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, that whatever had taken hold of John, whatever had destroyed her life, wasn't done yet. As the days passed, Lisa began to regain her strength. Margaret's care and the quiet, peaceful environment of her home helped Lisa heal in ways she hadn't thought possible. But the sense of unease never fully went away. It lingered in the back of her mind, a constant reminder that something was wrong. One night, as Lisa lay in bed, she had a dream. She was back in Clara's shop, surrounded by rows of shoes. Clara stood behind the counter, her smile sweet, but her eyes cold. "You made the right choice," Clara said, her voice echoing in the empty shop. "The shoes will take care of everything." Lisa woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. She sat up in bed, her mind racing. The dream felt so real, so vivid, and it only deepened her suspicion that the shoes were at the center of everything. The next morning, she told Margaret about the dream. Margaret listened quietly, her expression growing darker with each word. "We need to find out more about Clara," Margaret said finally. "About those shoes. If what you're saying is true, she's dangerous, and we can't let her keep hurting people." Lisa nodded, determination hardening her features. "I'll do whatever it takes. For my baby. For John. For everyone she's hurt." Margaret smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "Then we'll do it together." Lisa and Margaret spent the next few days gathering information about Clara and her shop. They started by talking to people in the market, asking subtle questions about the shoe seller and her business. At first, no one seemed to notice anything unusual. Clara was known for her friendly demeanor and affordable prices, and most people spoke highly of her. But as Lisa dug deeper, she began to notice a pattern. Several people mentioned strange occurrences after buying shoes from Clara. A woman who had purchased a pair of sandals suddenly found herself estranged from her family. A man who bought work boots lost his job under mysterious circumstances. And a young couple who had bought matching sneakers broke up shortly after, despite being deeply in love. Each story was different, but they all had one thing in common: the shoes. Lisa's unease grew with each story. She knew she wasn't imagining things. The shoes were cursed, and Clara was using them to destroy lives. But how? And why? Lisa needed answers, and she knew there was only one way to get them. "We need to go back to the shop," Lisa said one evening as she and Margaret sat by the fire. "I need to see it for myself. Maybe I can find something, anything, that will help us understand what's going on." Margaret nodded, her expression serious. "I'll go with you, but we need to be careful. If Clara is as dangerous as you say, we can't let her know what we're up to." The next morning, they made their way to the market. Lisa's heart pounded as they approached Clara's shop. It looked the same as it had the last time she was there. Neatly arranged shoes on display, a cheerful sign above the door, and Clara herself standing behind the counter, smiling warmly at customers. But this time, Lisa saw something she hadn't noticed before. A shadowy figure lingered near the entrance, its form barely visible but unmistakably sinister. It was the same demon she had seen before, its twisted grin sending chills down her spine. Lisa grabbed Margaret's arm. "Do you see that?" she whispered, pointing toward the shop. Margaret frowned, squinting at the shop. "I don't see anything," she said. "What are you talking about?" Lisa's heart raced. She was the only one who could see it. The demon was real. It was tied to Clara's shop. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "We need to go inside," she said, her voice trembling. "But be careful. Something's not right." They entered the shop, the bell above the door jingling softly. Clara looked up from the counter, her smile widening when she saw Lisa. "Welcome back, dear," she said, her voice sweet but with an edge that made Lisa's skin crawl. "I was wondering when I'd see you again." Lisa forced a smile, though her stomach churned. I want to look at some more shoes," she said, her voice shaky. Clara's eyes gleamed with something unnatural. "Of course, dear. Take your time. Let me know if you need any help." Lisa and Margaret began to browse the shelves, pretending to look at the shoes while keeping an eye on Clara. Lisa's hands trembled as she picked up a pair of boots, her mind racing. She needed to find something, anything, that would prove Clara's involvement in the curses. As they moved deeper into the shop, Lisa noticed a door at the back, partially hidden behind a curtain. It was slightly ajar and a faint, eerie light spilled out from the crack. Lisa's heart pounded as she glanced at Margaret. "I need to see what's back there," she whispered. Margaret nodded, her expression grim. "I'll keep an eye on Clara. Be quick." Lisa slipped behind the curtain and into the back room. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with strange objects. Jars of dark liquid, bundles of herbs, and what looked like small carved figurines. But what caught Lisa's attention was a table in the center of the room. On it was a pair of shoes, identical to the ones she had bought, surrounded by candles and strange symbols drawn in chalk. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the source of the curses. She reached for the shoes, her hands trembling, but before she could touch them, a voice behind her made her freeze. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Lisa turned to see Clara standing in the doorway, her smile gone, replaced by a cold, menacing glare. "You shouldn't be back here, dear," Clara said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is no place for curious little girls." Lisa's heart raced as she backed away, her mind screaming at her to run. But before she could move, Clara stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Clara sneered. "But you have no idea what you're dealing with." Lisa's back at the wall, and she realized with a sinking feeling that she was trapped. Clara's smile returned, but it was no longer sweet. It was twisted, cruel, and filled with a darkness that made Lisa's blood run cold. "You should have stayed out of this," Clara said, her voice dripping with venom. "But since you're here, I might as well show you what happens to those who meddle in my business." Lisa's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. But before Clara could take another step, Margaret burst into the room, her eyes blazing with fury. "Leave her alone," Margaret shouted, her voice firm and commanding. Clara turned to Margaret, her expression flickering with surprise. But it was only for a moment. Her smile returned, wider and more sinister than before. "Ah, the stepmother," Clara said, her voice mocking. "How touching. But you're too late. The girl is mine now." Margaret stepped forward, her eyes locked on Clara's. "You won't touch her," she said, her voice steady but filled with anger. "I won't let you." Clara laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down Lisa's spine. "You think you can stop me?" she sneered. "You're just a foolish old woman. You have no power here." Margaret didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. "We'll see about that," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. Clara's eyes widened as she recognized the vial. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice rising with panic. Margaret didn't answer. Instead, she uncorked the vial and threw the liquid at Clara. The moment it touched her skin, Clara let out a blood-curdling scream. Her body convulsed, her skin turning gray as she collapsed to the floor. The candles on the table flickered and went out, and the room was plunged into darkness. Lisa stared in shock as Clara's body began to decay before her eyes, turning to dust and scattering into the air. The shadowy figure she had seen earlier let out a final, ear-splitting shriek before vanishing into nothingness. Margaret grabbed Lisa's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We need to go," she said urgently. "Now." Lisa didn't argue. She followed Margaret out of the shop, her heart pounding as they ran through the market and back to Margaret's house. When they finally arrived, Lisa collapsed onto the couch, her mind reeling for what she had just witnessed. What was that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Margaret sat down beside her, her expression grim. "That," she said, "was the end of Clara. But it's not over yet. The curses she placed on those shoes are still out there, and we need to make sure they're destroyed before they can do any more harm." Lisa nodded, her determination returning. "Then let's finish this," she said, her voice steady. "For John, for everyone she's hurt, and for my baby." Margaret smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "Together," she said. Lisa and Margaret spent the next few days preparing to destroy the cursed shoes. They knew it wouldn't be easy. The shoes were tied to something dark and powerful, and breaking their hold would require more than just burning them. They needed to be careful, methodical, and above all, united. Margaret had connections to a pastor in a nearby town, a man known for his ability to handle spiritual matters. She arranged for them to meet him, and Lisa felt a flicker of hope as they drove to his small, unassuming church. The pastor, a kind-faced man with gentle eyes, listened intently as Lisa told him everything about the shoes, about Clara, about the demon she had seen, and about the destruction Clara had caused. When she finished, the pastor leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "What you're dealing with is a powerful curse," he said. "These shoes are not just objects. They're vessels for evil spirits. Clara used them to steal the destinies of those who wore them, feeding on their pain and suffering." Lisa's stomach churned at the thought. "How do we stop it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How do we break the curse?" The pastor stood up and walked over to a small cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of anointing oil and handed it to Lisa. "You need to destroy the shoes," he said. "Burn them, but you must be careful. The spirit inside will fight back. You must anoint your feet with this oil and pray for protection before you do anything." Lisa took the bottle, her hands trembling. "What about John?" she asked. "He's still wearing his pair. How do I save him?" The pastor's eyes softened. "Once the shoes are destroyed, the curse will be broken, but you must act quickly. The longer the shoes remain, the stronger the hold they have on him." Lisa nodded, determination hardening her features. "I'll do it. I'll destroy them." That night, Lisa and Margaret prepared for what they knew would be a difficult and dangerous task. They gathered the shoes, Lisa's pair, which she kept hidden away, and John's pair, which Margaret had retrieved from their house while John was at work. They set up a fire pit in the backyard, the flames crackling and casting flickering shadows on the ground. Lisa poured the anointing oil over the shoes, her hands shaking as she whispered a prayer for protection. The moment the oil touched the leather, the shoes began to twitch, as if something inside was fighting to escape. Lisa's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't stop. She threw the shoes into the fire, and the moment the flames touched them, a deafening scream filled the air. The fire roared, twisting and turning as dark smoke erupted from the shoes. The air grew cold, and Lisa felt a presence, a malevolent force, pushing against her. She stumbled back, clutching the bottle of oil. "In the name of God, I rebuke you," she shouted, her voice trembling but firm. "You have no power here." The fire blazed brighter, the screams growing louder and more desperate. And then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, the flames died down. The shoes were gone, reduced to ash. Lisa collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. It was over. The curse was broken. The next morning, John woke up with a start. He sat up in bed, his heart racing. Something felt different. He looked around the room, his eyes landing on the empty spot where Lisa usually slept. Memories flooded back. Memories of the fights, the betrayal, the coldness he had shown her. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice filled with regret. He grabbed his phone and called Lisa, his hands shaking. "Lisa, please," he begged when she answered. "I don't know what happened. I don't know why I did what I did. Please, just tell me where you are." Lisa's voice was calm but firm. "I'm at Margaret's house. If you want to talk, you can come here." John didn't hesitate. He drove to Margaret's house, his mind racing. When he arrived, Lisa was waiting for him on the porch. She looked tired, but there was a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I don't know what came over me," John said, his voice breaking. "Please forgive me. You were under a spell," Lisa said. "That woman, Clara, her shoes did something to you. I don't know how, but they made you hurt me. But the curse is broken now. But it doesn't mean everything is fixed, John. You have to earn my trust again." Lisa said. John swallowed hard. "I will. I'll do whatever it takes." The weeks that followed were difficult. Lisa and John began to rebuild their relationship, but it wasn't easy. The wounds were still fresh, and the pain of losing their baby was a heavy burden to bear. But they took it one day at a time. John did everything he could to prove himself. He apologized to Lisa every day, not just with words but with actions. He cooked her meals, took her to doctor's appointments, and listened when she needed to talk. He even went to counseling, determined to understand how he had let the curse take hold of him. Lisa, for her part, set clear boundaries. She wasn't ready to move back in with John, and she made it clear that she needed time to heal. But she also allowed herself to hope. to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. One evening, as they sat on Margaret's porch watching the sunset, John turned to Lisa. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "for everything, for hurting you, for betraying you, for not being there when you needed me most." Lisa looked at him, her eyes soft but serious. "I forgive you, John, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We have to work every day to make sure something like this never happens again." John nodded, tears in his eyes. "I promise, Lisa. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Lisa reached out and took his hand, her own tears falling freely now. "I believe you, John, and I want to believe in us again. But it's going to take time. We've both been through so much, and we need to heal together." John reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm and familiar. "I love you, Lisa," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I never stopped loving you, even when I couldn't show it. You're my everything." Lisa's breath caught her throat as she looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the man who had stood by her through thick and thin, who had promised to love her forever. And in that moment, she knew that despite everything, her heart still belonged to him. Tears streamed down her face as she leaned into his touch. "I love you too, John," she whispered. "I always have." And then, without another word, they moved toward each other, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. It was a kiss filled with years of love, pain, and longing, a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of hope, of a future they were determined to reclaim. John's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Lisa clung to him as if she never wanted to let go. When they finally pulled away, both of them were breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. Lisa's heart was pounding, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from fear or anger. It was from love, pure, unyielding love. John brushed a tear from her cheek, his voice soft but filled with determination. "We're going to be okay, Lisa. I promise." Lisa nodded, her eyes shining with hope. "I know we will. As long as we have each other, we'll be okay." They sat there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it, together. But Lisa never forgot the lesson she had learned. Not everything that glitters is gold. And sometimes, the people you least expect can become your greatest allies. She had learned to be vigilant, to trust her instincts, and to never take the people she loved for granted. And as she sat there, holding John's hand and watching the stars appear in the night sky, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before.